Welcome to the Grand Theft World podcast, hosted and sponsored by GrandTheftWorld.com. It's July 24th, 2022. This is episode 90. It's going to be called something like How to Outgrow the NWO. We're going to play a segment that I did with James Corbett earlier this week. But before we can get to juicy stuff like that, I'm sorry to announce that the former vice president has COVID cancer. He announced that he had cancer.
You'd had to put on their windshield wipers to get literally the oil slick off the window. That's why I and so damn many other people I grew up have cancer.
And then the next day he had COVID. I'm not sure which, but...
Hey folks, guess you heard. This morning I tested positive for COVID.
Our hearts and thoughts and prayers go out to him. And I want to, he's had those 4 shots already.
You're not going to get COVID if you have these vaccinations.
Yeah.
This continues to be a pandemic of the unvaccinated.
Joe Biden, double masked, quadruple vaxxed, COVID positive.
You're not going to get COVID if you have these vaccinations.
But don't worry, he's taking Paxlovid, the same drug that Anthony Fauci took after he caught COVID, after being quadruple vaxxed, and then caught COVID again 2 weeks later. 100% safe and effective.
They're safe and they're highly effective.
Meanwhile, here in the UK, we're subjected to the same old broken record. COVID cases rise a bit. Experts call for the reintroduction of COVID restrictions. COVID cases fall without any of those restrictions being reintroduced. Then they go quiet again. COVID cases rise a bit again. Experts call for the reintroduction of COVID restrictions again. Same old shite again and again and again. Rinse, wash, repeat.
Also, there's a news story out this week on the efficacy of SSRIs, serotonin reuptake inhibitors, actually selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors as they're known. They're used for people who have depression. And instead of asking, what's your life like? What's your philosophy like? What are your goals like? Where are you at with your learning and where you are with life? They just say, take this pill. They tell you on TV to ask your doctor to take the pill. Well, now there's new science out there. I guess that's a thing, science. And it shows that those pills might not have been doing the things that they claim to have been doing.
20% of the country is on medication for mental illness. And that number is climbing by multiple percentage points every year. Meanwhile, our health authorities, our so-called health authorities, tell us that the real crisis is untreated, read non-drugged, unprescribed mental illness. So they see the 65 million Americans on psychotropic drugs for mental illness, and they insist that the number is far too low. We actually need to get it much higher. Should be 100 million, should be 150. It should be everybody. And I'm not joking about that either, because the DSM expands, the Diagnostic Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders expands with each new edition until every single human emotion, personality trait, proclivity, impulse has become a mental illness. And we're already at the point with the latest DSM where you can open it up and find probably at least 5 or 10 mental illnesses that would apply to you. Many of Big Pharma critics are willing to simply take Big Pharma's word for it. Well, they say we're all mentally ill, so I guess we are. They might lie about everything else, these selective critics will say, but they would never lie about the best treatment for depression. They would never lie about that. Quite an odd claim when you think about it. And on the subject of depression, the, quote, mental illness that accounts for a large portion of that 65 million figure, it's been taken as gospel for many years that drugs are necessary to treat it because the condition is caused by a quote-unquote chemical imbalance in the brain. This is an idea that people have absorbed from the culture and especially from propaganda from the drug companies. Reported by The Guardian finally blows the lid off of the whole scam. Here's the headline. Little evidence that chemical imbalance causes depression, UCL scientists find. Reading now from the study, it says, scientists have called into question the widespread use of antidepressants after a major review found no clear evidence that low serotonin levels are responsible for depression. Prescriptions for antidepressants have risen dramatically since the 1990s, with 1 in 6 adults and 2% of teenagers in England now being prescribed them. Millions more people around the world regularly use antidepressants. Quote, many people take antidepressants because they've been led to believe their depression has a biochemical cause, But this new research suggests that this belief is not grounded in evidence. This, according to the study's lead author, Joanne Moncrief, a professor of psychiatry at University College London and consultant psychiatrist at Northeast London NHS Foundation Trust. Quote, "It is always difficult to prove a negative, but I think we can safely say that after a vast amount of research conducted over several decades, there is no convincing evidence that depression is caused by serotonin abnormalities, particularly by lower levels or reduced activity of serotonin. Thousands of people suffer from side effects of antidepressants, including the severe withdrawal effects that can occur when people try to stop taking them, yet prescription rates continue to rise. We believe this situation has been driven partly by the false belief that depression is due to a chemical imbalance. It is high time to inform the public that this belief is not grounded in science." So it would seem that Big Pharma has made billions of dollars fixing a problem that does not exist. Depression certainly exists, don't get me wrong, but depression caused by a chemical imbalance is a myth. And it is a mythical creation that the antidepressants are meant to fix. It's something the pharmaceutical companies have made up, a problem they made up, and then gave us the cure for.
Also, crickets. It's not just for bad jokes anymore. It's in your food supply. We're going to learn about cricket bars, cricket meal. They want you to eat crickets. They call it micro agriculture, micro ranching. They want the world to eat crickets. It's not just Klaus Schwab who says, let you eat bugs. It's about the fact that they reserve meat, cows, poultry, these sort of things for themselves. They want the general population in the prison to eat the bugs. And the World Economic Forum's making the whole place into a prison. We're going to hear a couple different clips on crickets as your protein source in the future if you don't do anything to raise the game here, because we have to make the system they are creating obsolete before it takes hold. It's kind of like you got to hit the Death Star before it fully becomes functional, which in neither Star Wars movie did they get that done.
Edward Snowden says we are all going to eat crickets.
Yeah, he had an interesting
People
tweet.
are like, I'm not going to eat the crickets. Oh, you're going to eat the crickets, brother. They're going to be everywhere. They're going to put them in Hot Pockets. Your kids are going to be like, Mom, I want the pizza crickets.
He's not wrong.
I saw this conspiracy theory, if you can call it that. I don't know. They said, in order to get people to eat crickets, you got to make them hungry first. Because if people are hungry, they will eat anything. Mm-hmm. So now we're looking at these food shortages. We're looking at what's going on with the Dutch farmers. Dutch farmers being told not to farm. At the same time, they're telling us a food shortage is coming. Mm-hmm. How does that make sense? Yeah. It doesn't. So we are going to all starve. Maybe not us here, and many at home might not if they bought their emergency food.
Oh, that's right.
But y'all are going to be eating crickets. You know why? He's right about the Hot Pockets. There's already a company in Canada. Have you seen this?
The President's Choice.
What? They put crickets in it?
They sell bags of crickets.
No. I'm talking about there's a chip company that puts cricket into their snacks so that you're
Added
like
protein.
inching your way there and an extra crunch. So imagine you get they're like Cheeto Puffs and you eat a Cheeto Puff and it's made of corn and cheese and stuff. You're like, this is good. So they mix in maybe like 5% cricket, added protein, and then you're like, this is good. You do that for a year or two, and you keep increasing the level of cricket in the food, and then eventually
you do that with
eating
cattle
cricket.
and like barley and molasses. You just increase the ration until they're able to eat it.
Bohemian Grove happened this week. I brought you guys a little artifact of that endeavor. Here's a 1992 play from Bohemian Grove. We're going to be digging into that later on the book cam.
And that's the other thing. We need to understand that historically this is important because these guys at the Bohemian Club and then Grove created the Manhattan Project, aka the nuclear bomb, nuclear energy, and a model of compartmentalization that would lead to an out of control, outlaw, military industrial complex that we would be warned about by Eisenhower, who was on the inside at Bohemian Grove itself. Okay? That's a huge aspect, the historical aspect of this. But then I want you to see the models in which that this took place, okay? So again, here it is that he has his chapter, Uncle George, on how he joins the Bohemian Club. And I want you to read what the initiate hears when he gets in by the high priest, because it's very, very important. Okay, it shows you once again, what does it mean, weaving spiders come not here? Well, it means that if you have ill intentions and you're not with the group and you're not going to keep your mouth shut, stay out. That's what it means. Okay? So he goes on to this. As the high priest, okay, after the cardinal brings in a new initiate or a illustrious neophyte, before you are permitted to know what this is all about, you will truly answer the question I am about to propound. But as your future happiness may be affected by any mistake in your answer, I will reply to it for you. And then he says, the answer being satisfactory, the candidate was requested to prepare himself for the obligation by taking the loving cup in his right hand and placing it in his left in his trousers pocket as an act of paying for the drink, being given to understand that that was as far as the true Bohemian ever got in paying for anything. All right, so they don't want the financial transactions. They want your loyalty. All right, the following is the obligation conferred. In the presence of the owl and this July and August body. So again, late July, early August. I hereby pledge my word in this Bohemian toddy that I will ever cherish with feelings of delight the high old initiation I am passing through tonight, nor will tell what hath been told me for friendship nor for pelf. I'm going to keep my mouth shut, except it to be to someone who knows how it is himself. So, in other words, an insider. To the rules and regulations I will rigidly adhere, but always drinking champagne in preference to beer. I will love each true Bohemian where'er on earth he goes, till he turns up to the daisies his emaciated toes. All this I truly promise on the honor of my name, and will do my level best to keep and perform the same. Should I ever divulge the secrets I've permitted here to know, may the wind blow through my whiskers when they're allowed to grow. Okay, you understand? Keep your mouth shut. You join the club.
The mRNA stories that we've gotten over the past 2 years as it's unfolded for this experimental mRNA DARPA-funded gene therapy that Moderna has pushed. There's also the problem I have with, who is it, Stefan Boncel helped to create through Biomilieu, the lab in Wuhan, and then he's also involved with Moderna that was funded from DARPA. The story is that DNA is now being altered by the mRNA in those experimental shots. We're going to have Kim Iverson bring that news to you.
Well, AP and Reuters did an interesting fact check that trended on social media yesterday about whether or not COVID vaccines alter DNA. Now, before we get to the fact check, I want to give you a little background information. Since the announcement of mRNA technology being the method used to create COVID vaccines, there have been people in the scientific community who were skeptical that it was the best method of all the vaccine methods we have available. The concern being that it hadn't been tested enough, it hadn't been used before, and there were still some lingering questions. Now, one of those questions being whether or not the mRNA molecule can penetrate the nucleus and alter or combine with our DNA. Now, some experts said they believed it could. After all, prior to the pandemic, mRNA technology was being studied as a promising new way to alter genes. The idea being mRNAs could alter bad genes that make a person susceptible to various illnesses and diseases. And that sounds pretty amazing. If we could avoid the diseases that we're genetically prone to, I think most of us would definitely want to do that. But the problem is it was all still very experimental and mRNAs hadn't quite gotten to that point yet. So when the vaccines were being rolled out, some scientists who knew what mRNAs were designed to do warned that they could possibly change our DNA. Now, obviously, this set off a frenzy amongst people who were already vaccine hesitant, and anyone who cited this as a concern was then labeled a conspiracy theorist. So that is where this claim came from, and apparently a study by some Swedish scientists, which we'll get into, was trending on social media to the point AP and Reuters decided to issue some fact checks. So here's AP's fact check. Social media users are citing months-old study from Sweden to push the unproven theory that mRNA COVID-19 vaccines permanently alter recipients' DNA. Experts and the study authors say the research is being misinterpreted. Here are the facts. I want to just so you know, hone in on that word permanently. So they are kind of giving some they're qualifying it a bit. But let's see what the AP's fact check article says. So in the article, it says, claim a Swedish study shows that Pfizer's COVID-19 vaccine changes recipients' DNA. AP's assessment, false. The study tested whether the vaccine's mRNA could be converted to DNA and found that this was the case in certain lab-altered liver cell lines under experimental conditions. It did not assess whether the vaccine alters the human genome or what the effects of that would be, according to experts and the study authors. Experts say additional research is needed because the findings in the lab setting cannot be used to make inferences about what might happen in a human body. So I found this statement interesting for a couple of reasons. First of all, I noticed AP didn't call this a conspiracy theory, but instead an unproven theory. So this gives me a little hope that maybe the trend of labeling anyone who questions something as a conspiracy theorist, maybe that's waning. Secondly, rather than just dismiss the claim outright, they did state that experts say more research is needed. So it's inconclusive. Now let's look at the Reuters fact check. A Swedish study conducted by Lund University does not show that mRNA COVID-19 vaccines permanently alter human DNA. The authors said their study could not be used to draw conclusions with human DNA as they used cell lines in lab petri dish for their work. Now, Reuters actually links us to a Q&A with the study's authors on the Lund University website, and the authors say the reason why they even took up this study was because of a previous study published by MIT, which indicated that SARS-CoV-2 virus mRNA can be converted to DNA and integrated into the human genome. Now, that study set off a frenzy and received an enormous amount of backlash for, quote unquote, feeding the vaccine skeptics. But the Swedes wanted to further study this, and what they did was they took human liver cells to see if the mRNA would penetrate the nucleus and integrate with the DNA, and they found that it did. They said, quote, "We show that the vaccine enters liver cells as early as 6 hours after the vaccine has been administered. We saw that there was DNA converted from the vaccine's mRNA in the host cells we studied. These findings were observed in petri dishes under experimental conditions, but we do not yet know if the converted DNA is integrated into the cell's DNA in the genome, and if so, if it has any consequences." So the reason they chose liver cells was because during testing, a Pfizer study injected the vaccine into mice and found that 18% of the vaccine accumulated in the liver after 30 minutes. So these researchers decided to try it on human liver cells. And they went on to say, quote, "It's important to bear in mind that the liver cells in the study are more genetically unstable than our own liver cells." So they give you that qualification of this whole entire study. So we don't really know what it would do in a living organism, a human being, and to our liver cells, but they saw what they saw in the petri dish. And they said, quote, "We understand that the study would attract attention, but we think it's self-evident that this type of research should be pursued. We have a new vaccine, and it needs to be tested in cell and animal models and also in humans in various ways. The results might be surprising, but it's also a bit surprising that such studies do not seem to have been carried out before."
And like I said, we got the interview I did with Corbett on autodidacticism. So how to learn anything for yourself. That's going to be something you might want to catch up on.
But it's really about self-discipline, diligence, work ethic, other things, right? So not everyone has that capacity or wants to reach that capacity. So we have to filter out people to see if it's someone with a victim mentality who thinks everything's somebody else's fault. I can't teach you. I don't know what to do with that. But I would also say by giving other people the blame, you take away responsibility from yourself and you deny yourself being able to solve the problem. Because when it's Bill Gates' fault, Bill Gates ain't going to come fix it for you. But when you take responsibility for it, I don't like what he's doing. I'm going to change. I'm going to have a greenhouse. I'm going to have a garden. Then you can do something about it. Then you can take action. Then you feel better.
Two things that I would like to touch on what you said there. One is that you are giving me flashbacks. I've forgotten that this happened, but when I was 12 or 13 years old, I read Vladislav Tretiak's autobiography. Why not? And I remember, the big idea, the big sort of unifying idea of his book was that life is about falling down and getting up, because that was how he learned to skate, and that is what life is about. And it's a pretty simple point, but now I'm realizing, that point has stuck with me for decades now. That's interesting, and obviously
it's
reflected in your experience there.
I know you're from Canada, and you guys are all born with skates up there, but it's not a normal thing to put those blades on your foot, to go on ice, and to stop. That was, it was mentally, how's the blade going to turn without flipping me over?
Oh, look, did I change cameras? I might even look at the right one. Blew the intro. All right, so let's go to the kickoff with Luke Radowski of We Are Change and Best Political Shirts autonomy.com. And let's get an overview of the news of the week, and then we'll dig in, do some deep dives, and we'll dissect the news until the wee hours of the morning.
Anybody living out in the boonies, anybody that's got a couple of acres of land and his own water supply and can grow his own food and that kind of thing, or have some sheep or some chickens, these people are a threat to the collectivist society, because they aren't going to go to the politicians and say, please feed me, please clothe me, please give me shelter. They tend to be independent. That's the secret.
Yep, self-sufficient, personally responsible human beings scare the crap out of the central controllers, and that's why they have been the #1 target when it comes to attacks against them in our political, cultural society.
What makes Autonomy uniquely empowering? Autonomy is a self-help course unlike any other. Over the course of our 12-week program, you'll experience weekly live lectures from Richard Grove, specifically designed to equip you with the skills you need to set yourself free. Free from the learned helplessness taught in our schools, free from the dependence on a corrupt system that serves only to uphold the rich, free from the structure of your 9-to-5 if that's your prerogative. Plus, you'll enter into a community of like-minded individuals who are pursuing the same freedom you are, and who'll support you and learn alongside you every step of the way. A lifetime of community and the tools to live however you want. We can't wait to meet you. Learn more at getautonomy.info.